The young woman named Gian has just been admitted to the university of her dreams. Brimming with excitement, she runs joyfully down the street when, out of nowhere, a young man collides with her, knocking her to the ground. The man is Yan Sheng, yet he doesn't even spare her a glance. Yan Sheng is immediately stopped by another girl who confesses her feelings to him. Gian, still on the ground, demands an apology, but instead of acknowledging his fault, Yan Sheng assumes she is helping the girl with her confession and flatly refuses to admit he was in the wrong. The girl making the confession, Mi Fen, then introduces Yan Sheng as nothing less than a mathematical prodigy whose research paper on the Poincaré conjecture had once been published in a scientific journal. Yan Sheng, with a sharp intellect and cold demeanor, turns to another student, Shi Fan, asking for her opinion on his perspective, yet she remains silent. It is Jian who unexpectedly breaks the silence. She calmly explains that the Poincaré conjecture demonstrates how every closed, simply connected three-dimensional space is essentially shaped like a three-dimensional sphere. Moreover, it is the only one among the 7 Millennium Prize problems that has been solved. Just as the air grows tense, Yan Sheng receives a phone call and leaves abruptly. In the rush, Mi Fen accidentally bumps into Jian, causing her to fling a cream cake right onto Yan Sheng's back. His cold voice cuts through the chaos as he warns them sternly, "Don't ever let me see either of you again." After settling into her dormitory, Jian meets her new roommate, Gu Tong, a quirky girl with a passion for fortune-telling using tarot cards. With a mischievous smile, Gu Tong predicts that Jian has just experienced a streak of bad luck, a reading that Jian finds surprisingly accurate. Amused, she offers Gu Tong some hometown delicacies to share. Just then, the door swings open, and in walks Mi Fen. She wrinkles her nose in disgust, complaining about the strange odor filling the room, revealing that she, too, will be sharing the same dormitory. Before Jian can react, her phone buzzes with a message, prompting her to rush off to the swimming pool to retrieve a book she had ordered online. At the poolside, Yan Sheng, now revealed as the president of the university's swim club, prepares to dive into the water. Yet, despite his poised stance, he freezes at the edge. Haunted by a psychological block, Yan Sheng cannot bring himself to leap in. It is at this moment that Jian arrives, only to realize the book she came to collect is in Yan Sheng's possession. Recognizing her instantly as the unlucky girl from earlier, Yan Sheng snaps at her, forbidding her to touch his book, but Jian insists, pointing out that she had already paid for it online. Their argument escalates into a tug-of-war, until, in the scuffle, Yan Sheng loses his footing and tumbles into the water. At first, Jian is indifferent. After all, he's dressed in the official swim team uniform, and surely a club president should know how to swim. But as she watches him flail helplessly, it becomes clear that he is on the verge of drowning. Against her initial judgment, Jian dives into the pool and pulls Yan Sheng to safety. From a distance, 2 male students spot Yan Sheng struggling and leap into the pool, hauling him back to the edge. On the deck, Jian immediately begins performing CPR and artificial respiration. Just as she leans close, Yan Sheng coughs up water right into her mouth, leaving her stunned and embarrassed. It is only when a nearby student, Yuan Sen, speaks up that Jian realizes she had mistaken Yan Sheng for the online bookseller. Once again, Yan Sheng coldly tells her never to bring her bad luck anywhere near him again. The very next day, the entire school forum explodes with gossip. The swimming club president almost drowned and was saved by a curly-haired girl performing mouth-to-mouth. Male students mock the so-called swimming prodigy for nearly drowning, while groups of female students sneer at Jian, calling her plain and unfashionable. Trying to set things right, Jian goes to retrieve her book and asks Yuan Sen to deliver a letter of apology to Yan Sheng. She blames herself, believing her stubborn tug-of-war over the book had caused him to fall into the pool. At first, Yan Sheng has no intention of reading the letter, but when he notices Yuan Sen's peculiar reaction, curiosity gets the better of him. Inside, he finds not only her apology, but also a photograph of his near-drowning incident. His pride stung and his temper flaring, Yan Sheng storms off in search of Jian. Just then, a ball suddenly comes flying toward Jian. Out of nowhere, Yan Sheng steps in, catching it effortlessly before it hits her. He presses her back gently against the fence, his expression sharp, and demands to know what she had truly wanted to say in her letter. Flustered but sincere, Jian explains that it had taken her a long time to gather the courage to write it. Hearing her earnestness, Yan Sheng finds himself momentarily disarmed, unable to argue further. Later, during the university's club fair, Jian sets her sights on the swimming club, rumored to award the highest training credits. She believes that since Yan Sheng has read her letter, he will not hold a grudge. Coincidentally, Mi Fen also signs up for the same club. While seniors praise Ji Fan for her outstanding record, Jian is dismissed for never having won a swimming award. Unbothered, she points to the club's posted mission mission statement, which emphasizes welcoming anyone who loves swimming. If the club only accepts the elite, she argues, it would be betraying its founding purpose. In that moment, Yansheng suddenly appears. To everyone's surprise, he agrees to admit Jiandan into the club. Yuan-sen supports the decision, reminding the others that Jiandan not only swims well, but also once saved their very own president from drowning. Yansheng then instructs her to officially report at 8 p.m. that evening. On her first training day, Yuan-sen announces that each newcomer will be paired with a senior for practice, but there is one exception. The club president himself, Yansheng, will personally mentor a single new member. After circling the poolside and inspecting the new recruits, Yansheng finally makes his choice. He points directly at Jiandan. Believing she has been given a rare privilege, Jiandan beams with determination, promising not to disappoint the club president. But the sight infuriates Mi Fen, who immediately challenges Jiandan to a duel in the water. The terms are simple. If Jiandan loses, she must surrender her spot and allow Mi Fen to be Yansheng's trainee. If Mi Fen loses, she will withdraw from the swimming club altogether. From a distance, Yuan-sen watches curiously, wondering why Yansheng would pick Jiandan out of all the newcomers. Yansheng's response is cold and calculated. He swears he will make her pay back every ounce of the bad luck she has brought him. As the race begins, Jiandan doesn't even know the proper starting stance. Yet, against all expectations, she quickly gains momentum, catches up to Mi Fen, and astonishingly overtakes her at the final stretch. Impressed, Yuan-sen remarks that the president clearly has a sharp eye for talent, choosing the one with the greatest hidden potential in swimming. Once practice concludes, Yansheng singles Jiandan out and calls her back. What follows is an intense, punishing training session. Every drill and every lap seems designed to push her past her limits. Though she realizes Yansheng is deliberately being hard on her, Jiandan endures the grueling regime with clenched teeth, determined to earn her training credits. Back at the dormitory, Jiandan falls victim to another one of Mi Fen's schemes. This time, Mi Fen mischievously mixes shampoo with hair dye, leaving Jiandan's hair unevenly colored. Flustered, Jiandan rushes out to a hair salon to fix the disaster. On her way, she accidentally bumps into Yansheng. Panicked, she clutches her hat tightly to hide her altered appearance. By the time she arrives at a nearby cafe, her new hairstyle has transformed her so completely that even Yansheng's group fails to recognize her, mistaking her for some cute stranger. Yansheng grumbles that his friends clearly lack aesthetic judgment if they cannot identify Jiandan. Later, on the second floor, Yansheng confronts her directly. He remarks that she still has time to fuss over her hair and idle distractions, and instructs Jiandan to attend an additional training session the next day. As she passes by the club office, Jiandan overhears him speak about her, saying that he recruited her into the swimming team as a way to make her pay for all the foolish trouble she has caused. Furious, Jiandan storms in, accusing him of being unreasonable. Yansheng returns the letter she had once mocked, prompting her to hurriedly explain that it was a sincere apology. Skeptical, Yansheng refuses to believe her and imposes a new rule. Jiandan must serve as his personal assistant to atone for her mistakes. For the next 10 days, Jiandan is forced to obey his every command without complaint. If she resists, Yansheng warns that she will face an even more rigorous special training regimen. Jiandan reluctantly agrees, motivated by her desire to secure the full scholarship next semester. The rules are exacting. After each training session, Jiandan must immediately buy lunch for Yansheng. He specifies that she purchase meals from multiple levels of the campus cafeteria: lunch from the first floor, spicy chicken from the third, fried eggs on the fourth, and steamed crab on the fifth, while he monitors from the second floor. To cope with Yansheng's demanding rules, Jiandan cleverly hires a campus food delivery service to handle his complicated lunch requests. She even reads aloud love letters secretly sent to him. Much to his silent frustration, Yansheng had intended to make her suffer, yet he never expected to spend the day listening to her chatter non-stop. At the library, Yansheng plans to tackle the newest math problem published in a scientific journal. Just as he prepares to focus, his close friend Sichuan has to leave for a part-time job, forcing Yansheng to reluctantly close the book. No sooner has he left than Jiandan arrives by coincidence. She is drawn to the very same book. As she opens it, she stumbles upon a fascinating math problem. Gutong remarks, puzzled, that Jiandan is already an outstanding student, a full scholarship recipient, yet she continues to dedicate herself to rigorous math practice. Jiandan explains that she loves mathematics, but her true passion is psychology, which she chose so she could help others more directly. At that moment, Yansheng texts her to clean the second floor of the swimming club, a task clearly designed to make her struggle. But Jiandan discovers a hidden indoor climbing room, turning the challenge into a small victory. Later, Yansheng borrows the same book again, only to find the math problem he intended to solve has already been completed. Sichuan guesses that the handwriting belongs to a girl. Intrigued and competitive, Yansheng begins writing an even more difficult problem inside, secretly hoping she will rise to the challenge and that she won't disappoint him. At the swimming club, Yansheng notices Gian asleep by the poolside. Gently waking her, he makes an unexpected decision to let go of the grudges he had held against her in the past. Later, as Gian enters the club office, she discovers a shattered trophy. Instinctively, she photographs it to figure out a way to repair it. At that moment, Yansheng storms in and snatches the trophy from her. It was a prize he had won alongside his closest friend, and seeing it broken makes him lose his composure. He immediately blames Gian for the accident. She protests, explaining that she only wanted to document the damage to find a solution, but he refuses to believe her and even knocks her phone to the ground. Gian remains adamant that she did not break the trophy. Just then, Yuan Sen enters and spots a concert ticket among the scattered items. Yansheng deduces that whoever broke the trophy must have left it behind. Determined to uncover the culprit, he attends the concert, but to his surprise, Gian is sitting right next to him. The soothing music lulls her into sleep on his shoulder. Despite repeatedly trying to push her away, Yansheng cannot manage it. As the concert ends late, he cannot call a ride. Luckily, Gian manages to rent the last electric scooter of the night. Feeling a twinge of pity, she lets him ride along. Though her driving skills leave him in sheer terror, Yansheng sternly warns her never to gift him another concert ticket again. He explains that the ticket had been placed right next to the shattered trophy. Gian finally understands why Mi Fen had suddenly invited her to the concert. She quickly reassures Yansheng that she would never waste money on someone so self-absorbed. In response, Yansheng coldly tells her that if she dislikes him so much, she shouldn't come to the swimming club at all. Back at the dormitory, Gian confronts Mi Fen, accusing her of being the one who broke Yansheng's trophy and deliberately giving her the concert ticket to take the blame. Mi Fen had also swapped out her apology letter. Gian warns her that if she keeps provoking her, she will no longer remain silent. Later at the library, Gian receives a call from her grandmother. Since her own phone was broken, she borrows the desk phone at the reception counter. She reassures her grandmother that her studies are going well, and proudly adds that she has even joined the swimming club. From a distance, Yansheng overhears the conversation, realizing that her broken phone was his fault. Not long after, Gian hands in a resignation letter to withdraw from the swimming club. Yansheng refuses to accept it, instead ordering her to rewrite it in at least 3,000 words before he'll even consider it. Furious, Gian declares that she will never return to the club, but Yansheng, recalling that he had broken her phone, decides to make amends by buying her a new one. Gian accepts it, but insists she will repay him over time. On another day, Yansheng eagerly heads to the library to check on the mathematics problems he had left behind. Just as he had hoped, the mysterious student hadn't disappointed him. From that moment, mathematics quietly becomes the invisible thread tying him and Gian together. With the start of a new semester, the school announces an increase in credits for club participation, making them count more heavily toward final evaluations. Wanting to regain her training points, Gian considers returning to the swimming club but fears Yansheng's rejection. At Gutong's suggestion, she approaches the student council president with a proposal to reopen the mountain climbing club. Yet, since the swimming club currently manages that training space, she cannot proceed without Yansheng's approval. During an elective class, Gian happens to run into Yansheng and immediately sits beside him, asking once again for the authorization to reclaim the second floor for the mountain climbing club. But Yansheng coldly refuses, insisting she doesn't meet his standards. Later at a cafe, Yansheng's group is busy decorating with balloons to welcome back his close friend, Sulishi, who has just returned after a year abroad. Ever thoughtful, Zishan prepares a Haiyan University handbook to help her adjust more easily. Just then, Gian barges in, pressing Yansheng to sign the authorization form. Sulishi quickly recognizes Gian as the girl who once pushed Yansheng into the water and, with a smile, invites her for a private chat. Sulishi gifts Yansheng a mathematical maze puzzle, sparking an impromptu contest between him and Gian. Noticing Gian slightly messy bangs, Sulishi offers her a pretty hairpin, but Gian, too shy to accept, later chases after Sulishi to return it, only to see her carelessly toss it into a trash bin the moment she turns away. Frustrated, Gian confronts Yansheng once more, demanding to know why he refuses to sign the authorization. Yansheng counters that she has likely never climbed a rock wall before and is only chasing credits rather than true passion. Then he issues a challenge. If she can climb to the top, he will approve her request. Without hesitation, Gian accepts, but it soon becomes clear she doesn't even know how to wear a harness properly. Embarrassed yet determined, she begs for more time. From that moment, Jian throws herself into learning rock climbing techniques and practices relentlessly. Despite her best efforts, she only manages to reach halfway before falling back down. Just as she stumbles, Yansheng instinctively moves forward, ready to catch her. At this moment, Sulishi suddenly expresses her desire to join the swimming club. Graceful, beautiful, and considerate, she quickly wins the affection of everyone around her. Not long after, Jian calls Yansheng over to witness the results of her relentless training. Full of confidence, she ties her hair back neatly, ready to take on the climb. But midway, a sudden slip causes a wave of panic among the onlookers. Her classmates urge her to give up, fearing for her safety. Yet Jian refuses to surrender. Fueled by sheer determination, she gathers her strength, pushes upward, and finally manages to touch the very top of the wall. Beaming with joy, she turns to Yansheng, proudly declaring that she has done it. However, in a cruel twist of fate, her hand slips right after her victory. She loses balance and falls only to be caught by Yansheng rushing forward. In the commotion, he accidentally stumbles, their lips brushing in an unexpected and awkward moment. Gas ripple through the crowd as dozens of phones are instantly raised to capture the scene. Breaking the tension, Sulishi reminds Yansheng that he is already late for his student council meeting. Embarrassed, he quickly leaves, while Jian remains hanging upside down, stunned and overwhelmed by what just happened. Later, Jian approaches Yansheng once more, asking him to finally sign the authorization form. But he calmly reminds her that the Mountaineering Club cannot survive unless it recruits at least 5 members. Determined, Jian designs flyers on her own to attract new members. Yet reality proves harsher than she expected. No one seems remotely interested in indoor climbing. 2 days pass, yet Jian still hasn't recruited any new members. Yuan-sen points out that handing out flyers is too limited and suggests promoting online. Inspired, Jian comes up with an idea and asks for his help. She invites the swimming club to join a rock climbing challenge with a prize, but most are too afraid of falling. Only Yuan-sen volunteers. Though halfway up, he freezes in fear. Seeing his friend in danger, Yansheng straps on safety gear and climbs up to rescue him. Guiding, Yuan-sen carefully back down. Grateful yet embarrassed, Yuan-sen apologizes for failing Jian and urges Yansheng to help her finish the promotional video. Without hesitation, Yansheng laces up climbing shoes and takes on the wall himself. His steady hands grip each hold with precision, and he swiftly claims the prize, earning admiration from the crowd. The surprise reward turns out to be a lifetime membership card. When Jian uploads the promotional clip online, it quickly sparks interest, and many students sign up for the Mountaineering Club. She thanks Yuan-sen for his support, while Yansheng teases her, saying that if she couldn't even figure out how to recruit members, how could she possibly innovate the club? Yuan-sen quietly notices how Yansheng guides Jian in his own way, yet still can't resist provoking her. In their applied mathematics class, Professor Wan Lixin gives the students an unusual challenge. They are free to form their own groups, but first, each must submit the name of the classmate they least want to work with. As expected, Yansheng writes down Dan's name, and she, of course, chooses him in return. Determined to push his students out of their comfort zones, Professor Wang deliberately pairs up those who dislike each other. Thus, Jian and Yansheng are forced to team up. Their assigned project, conducting a survey on college students' views on love. The requirements are strict. Data must be statistically accurate, with a margin of error no greater than 0.1, and the entire process must be recorded on video to prevent fabrication. Yansheng takes charge, instructing Jian to prepare the questionnaire and arrange the setting at the cafeteria. At the appointed time, he arrives with professional camera equipment, while Jian, having stayed up all night, brings along an intricately detailed survey sheet. Unfortunately, the questions prove far too long for anyone to answer patiently. Pressed for a solution, Jian turns to Huo Zuyan, Yansheng's close friend, for help, but even he declines. Seeing her struggle, Yansheng suggests a shift in strategy and begins teaching her the basics of filming. Under his guidance, Jian starts practicing to distinguish between wide shots and close-ups, slowly picking up the rhythm of handling the camera. At that moment, Jian stumbles and falls against Yansheng's chest. Flustered, he quickly tells her not to damage the camera, though no girl would easily reject someone as handsome as him. Jian, however, worries that too many female participants compared to male ones will skew the survey results. To help, Yansheng asks Yuan-sen to gather more students at the cafe. Jian hands out questionnaires, urging everyone to answer sincerely. Yuan-sen jokes that the biggest challenge for most is simply how to get a girlfriend. Just then, Sulishi and Huo Zuyang arrive, lending a hand to the project. When tallying the responses, Jian realizes one sheet is missing and asks Yansheng to fill it in. He writes down his choice: a soulmate, someone who can understand him without words. Yuan-sen teases that, aside from his mother, only Sulishi could possibly meet that description. But Yansheng adds a twist. The girl would also need to be good at math and love swimming. At that, Sen turns the camera toward Jiandan, because she is the only one who perfectly fits such exacting standards. Back at the dorm, Yuan Sen happens to catch Yansheng secretly replaying the scene where Jiandan stumbled into his chest. On her end, Jiandan is equally shaken as she re-watches that brief but intimate moment. Mifen, however, grows increasingly hostile toward Jiandan. Out of jealousy, she snoops through Jiandan's messages and discovers that Yansheng had reminded her to revise their survey data. Seizing the chance to sabotage her, Mifen deliberately deletes the message. When presentation day arrives, Yansheng quickly notices the data remains uncorrected. Without hesitation, he pulls out the USB and insists he can deliver the entire report from memory, asking Professor Wang Lixin to allow him to present orally. His delivery is articulate and persuasive, leaving the class impressed. Yet the professor remains unmoved, awarding only a grade of C. The reason? The assignment explicitly required both a spoken presentation and a PowerPoint file. By removing the USB, Yansheng had effectively dismissed Jiandan's hard work. After class, Jiandan confronts him, demanding an explanation. Yansheng, however, turns the blame back on her. Why hadn't she fixed the data as instructed? If he hadn't cut the slideshow short, he argues, they might have ended up with an even worse grade than C. Back at the dormitory, Jiandan confides in her friend Gu Tong. Her voice heavy with despair, she admits she has lost her full scholarship and now must somehow find a way to cover tuition for the next semester. Otherwise, she will be forced to drop out. Overhearing this, Mi Fen feels a twinge of guilt. She never imagined her spiteful act of deleting a single message could spiral into such serious consequences. Desperate to earn money, Jiandan applies for a part-time job at a cafe, but Yuan Sen bluntly tells her the place isn't short of staff. Instead, Yansheng happens to be recruiting assistants for the swimming club. Meanwhile, Sulishi, ever considerate, suggests another opportunity, remarking that the school's wages are far too low for Jiandan to rely on. By chance, Gutong's cosplay club rents the very cafe where Jiandan works to host an event. Yansheng is invited as well, though he fails to recognize Jiandan behind her sly fox mask. Seizing the opportunity to vent her frustrations, Jiandan mischievously slips a dose of wasabi into Yansheng's drink. But before she can see the plan through, a co-worker urgently asks her to deliver several drinks to customers. When she returns, the table is cluttered with multiple identical glasses. In the confusion, her trick backfires. The cafe owner catches Jiandan in the act and accuses her of stealing from a customer's order. His warning is stern: if she causes trouble again, she will be fired on the spot. In this episode, Gutong invites the legendary cosplayer and her idol, Luo Shui, to an event. When she hears a commotion, she rushes in and drives away, a pushy paparazzo. Strangely, Luo Shui's voice sounds familiar, but he insists they've never met. Spotting a bag identical to Huo Zuyan's, Gutong calls out his name, and to her shock, Luo Shui removes his mask, revealing himself as Huo Zuyang. He asks her to keep his secret safe. Elsewhere, Yansheng discovers Jiandan working at a bar. Concerned, he bluntly asks if she is so desperate for money that she has to wear short dresses to please customers. At that moment, a guest suddenly vomits after drinking a wasabi spike cocktail. As the party begins, Luo Shui makes a dazzling entrance, greeted with cheers like a god in the cosplay world. Yansheng chases after Jiandan, suspecting the wasabi drink was meant for him, and mutters that losing this job wouldn't be a real loss. Jiandan, hurt, only pleads for him to keep his distance. Later, during applied mathematics class, Professor Wang Lixin announces that a mathematics journal is collecting student essays. Anyone selected will receive extra credit toward their final grade. Jiandan is overjoyed, realizing this could be her last chance to win back a full scholarship. Around the same time, Yuan Sen tells Yansheng the reason she lost it in the first place: a failed elective course. To cover tuition, she has been forced to work part-time. Yuan Sen then urges Yansheng to help Jiandan write a paper worthy of publication, one that might secure her future. At the library, Yansheng compiles a set of essay writing tips for Jiandan and arranges to meet her at a cafe every day at 5 to guide her through the process. Admitting his mistake, he confesses that, instead of helping her properly, he had only sent reminders to correct her data. Jiandan clarifies she never received such messages. Still, Yansheng keeps his WeChat logs as proof, suspecting someone may have deleted the texts from her phone. At the cafe, Jiandan buys Yansheng a drink as thanks. He urges her to open her materials and pay attention to his notes, pointing out classic essay topics by page number, recalling even the details of page 10. Jiandan is stunned by his sharp memory, but Yansheng reminds her to stop wasting time and focus on his guidance. After a long night of research, Jiandan dozes off at the table. Yansheng instinctively brushes a strand of hair from her face before quickly pulling his hand back. Waking her gently, he asks if the paper is complete, reviews it carefully and finally approves it for submission. While Yansheng steps outside, Jian Dan wipes down his phone and notices it isn't his old model. At that moment, Sichuan passes by and compliments her on getting the latest version. When Yansheng returns, he realizes Jian Dan has discovered his new phone. She immediately transfers all her part-time earnings to him, promising to repay the rest soon. Later, Yansheng slips another math problem into their usual book as a secret message. In response, Jian Dan leaves him a note suggesting he check Hardy's number theory, 2002 edition. Yet after scouring the entire library, Yansheng finds no such volume. Determined to solve the mystery, he sets a meeting at the bookshelf that evening at 7. When the long-awaited pen pal meeting finally arrives, both Jian Dan and Yansheng are filled with nervous anticipation. Just then, Yansheng receives a call from Jian Dan's phone, only to hear a man's voice saying the owner left it behind at a pizza shop. If no one comes within 20 minutes, he warns, he'll take it away. Forced to choose, Yansheng postpones the meeting to retrieve the phone for her. Meanwhile, knowing Yansheng is meeting his pen pal, Sulishi also heads to the library. There she sees Jian Dan clutching a Greek mathematics book, waiting for her friend. To her shock, Jian Dan turns out to be the very girl Yansheng secretly cares for. At the pizza shop, Yansheng gets the phone back, though the man eyes him suspiciously, noting he doesn't look like the boyfriend who dropped it. Yansheng then realizes Jian Dan never set a password. A saved contact with 3 heart emojis makes him wonder, does she already have a boyfriend? Back at the library, Jian Dan grows disheartened when her pen pal never arrives. She slips her number inside the mathematics book, only for Sulishi to secretly steal the note and even recommend the book to a fellow math student, setting off a chain of misunderstandings. At the library, Yansheng runs into Jian Dan and immediately questions her about the person she was supposed to meet. Jian Dan explains they have been corresponding for a while, though this is their first attempt to meet in person. Worried, Yansheng warns her about being deceived, but she firmly replies that their exchanges are purely academic and reminds him that her personal life is none of his concern. Just then, a call from the number saved with 3 hearts comes through. Seeing Jian Dan's happy smile as she answers, Yansheng becomes convinced she is already in love. Back at the dorm, Jian Dan discovers that Yansheng has locked her phone with a password. Frustrated, she blames Gutong, thinking he lost it earlier, but learns he only borrowed it after his own phone died. The truth surfaces when Yansheng hints that the password is linked to curly noodles. Jian Dan finally unlocks it by entering the date they first met. When Yansheng returns, his friends eagerly ask what the mysterious girl looked like. To their surprise, he says he missed the meeting while retrieving Jian Dan's phone. At that moment, it becomes clear, even to Yuan Sen, that Jian Dan means more to Yansheng than any girl he might have met at the library. On Singles Day, the swimming club hosts a wish card activity. Yuan Sen encounters Jian Dan and Gutong and quickly pulls them into the game. He reminds them that their wishes must be something achievable within the day. When all the cards are collected, Jian Dan happens to draw Yuan Sen's wish. She scolds him for taking advantage of the occasion just to ask her to buy gaming parts. Meanwhile, Gutong hopes to draw Huo Zuyan's card, but instead, she ends up having to buy things for someone else. Huo Zuyang is paired with Sulishi to dote on a cat, while Zishan is tasked with taking cosplay photos with Gutong. The 2 boys, catching on to the situation, cleverly swap cards with each other. Soon after, Yuan Sen brings the box of wishes over to drag Yansheng into the game. Yansheng has only one wish, to quickly solve the math problem in front of him. Unexpectedly, Yuan Sen draws his best friend's card, while Yansheng pulls Jian Dan's wish, hoping to meet her pen pal who helps her with math. Knowing Jian Dan is reluctant to spend money on gaming parts, Yuan Sen tries to persuade her to switch wishes with him. But when Jian Dan sees Yansheng's name on the card, she figures it's better to spend money for Yuan Sen instead. Yansheng, embarrassed at the thought of failing in front of the club members, begs Jian Dan to help him. At the library, Yansheng watches Jian Dan working through his problem. He thinks that ordinary logic will never be enough to solve this puzzle. Jian Dan, unimpressed, calls him a weirdo for even wishing to tackle a math problem on such a special day. While Jian Dan steps out to get some water, Yansheng notices that she is reading a number theory book published in 2002. At that moment, he becomes certain she is indeed his longtime pen pal. Just then, a call comes in from a contact saved with 3 heart emojis. Yansheng picks it up on her behalf, assuming it must be her boyfriend, but to his surprise, it's Jian Dan's grandmother on the other end. Flustered, he quickly hands the phone back to her. Jian Dan scolds him for answering her call without permission. What if her grandmother misunderstood and thought she already had a boyfriend? Yansheng recalls that just last night, Jian Dan mentioned she had been on a date. Jian Dan hurriedly clarifies that it wasn't a romantic outing, but simply a meeting with her pen pal. Relieved, Yansheng secretly rejoices rejoices, though he also blames her for not making this clear to him sooner. Meanwhile, Huo Zuyang takes Gutong to a photo studio to help her fulfill her wish. Cosplaying as Luo Shui, he transforms into a cold, untouchable immortal to the rest of the world, yet one who shows nothing but tenderness to his wife. Later, during their applied mathematics class, the professor announces that Jiandan's essay has been selected for publication in an academic journal. Overjoyed, Jiandan thanks Yansheng sincerely for all the support he has given her. Jiandan invites Yansheng out for a meal. Wearing a dress for the very first time, she leaves him momentarily stunned. He pretends he only stopped by to pick her up because it was on his way. Jiandan originally planned to rent a public e-bike, but then realized she was wearing a dress, so she opted for a shared taxi instead. On the ride, she mischievously makes Yansheng sit next to a rough-looking delinquent. At the seafood buffet, Jiandan piles her plate with nearly twice as much food as Yansheng. Curious, he casually asks how she feels about her pen pal. Jiandan comments that he's intelligent but with terrible character. He once broke a promise to meet her and then disappeared without a word. Knowing the meal wouldn't be cheap, Yansheng sneaks out to pay the bill first, only to be told by the receptionist that Jiandan had drawn a free meal voucher. Taking advantage of the situation, Yansheng deliberately orders the most expensive bottle of champagne in the restaurant. Jiandan quickly makes an excuse, claiming she's allergic to alcohol and can only drink beer. When the staff mention they have imported German stout, Jiandan hesitates, thinking beer would make her too bloated. Yet by then, Yansheng has already opened the champagne. Hearing that the bottle costs over 600 yuan, she reluctantly drinks, not wanting it to go to waste. When Jiandan later tries to pay the bill, she learns that Yansheng has already taken care of it. He teases her, saying it hardly counts as gratitude to treat him to a free dinner. Jiandan insists that sincerity cannot be measured in money, and instead promises to grant him one request in return. Yansheng asks Jiandan to help the club welcome visiting guests to campus. Just then, a staff member approaches Yansheng with a survey form, while Jiandan catches sight of a pair of beautiful hiking shoes, though sadly, she can't afford them. During the campus tour, Jiandan is assigned to guide a group of elementary school students. At first, she's impressed by how they march in neat rows, contrary to their reputation for being rowdy, but within just 5 minutes, Jiandan is so exhausted, she collapses onto the ground. When the tour finally wraps up, they suddenly discover that one girl, Wu Jiang, is missing. Jiandan dashes off to search for her, and finds her fascinated by a line of ants carrying crumbs, marveling at how diligent they are, yet how easily they could be crushed underfoot. At that moment, Yansheng arrives. As the two exchange a few words, Wu Jiang disappears again. They hear her cries for help from the water, but Yansheng freezes, haunted by the past. When a close friend lost his life saving him from drowning, Jiandan manages to rescue the little girl and hand her safely back to the teacher. Noticing Jiandan's injured leg as she struggles to walk, Yansheng immediately lifts her in his arms and carries her to the infirmary. The doctor instructs that she must avoid walking for a week. Determined to help, Yansheng finds a bicycle and rides her back to the dormitory. Sitting behind him, Jiandan lightly grips the hem of his shirt. Yansheng doesn't look back, but a bright smile spreads across his face. Since he's not allowed into the girls' dormitory, Yansheng asks another club member to deliver lunch to Jiandan. When she opens it, she's surprised to find the tray filled almost entirely with vegetables. At that moment, Yansheng calls to explain that he chose the meal according to proper nutritional standards. In her clumsiness, Jiandan drops the lunchbox lid. Worried she might have fallen, Yansheng demands that she turn on her video call, or else he'll barge into the girls' dorm himself. Seeing her through the screen, he teases her for wearing a childish shirt and living in such a messy dorm room. Suddenly, Gutong walks in and notices her friend's injury. She immediately insists that Yansheng take responsibility for Jiandan. The next morning, Yansheng shows up early to drive Jiandan to class. After her lecture, he takes her straight to the club. With Jiandan unable to participate, Yansheng steps in as trainer, and his coaching leaves the members feeling energized. To toughen them up further, he even takes everyone to the beach for endurance training. Watching the exhausted members, Jiandan quickly pleads with him to break the drills down step by step. Later at the club office, Yansheng asks Sulishi to borrow her computer. Overhearing that he had gone to pick Jiandan up again, Sulishi spitefully spills water on her keyboard. Since she hasn't finished her essay, Yansheng has no choice but to help her repair the laptop first. He then texts Jiandan, explaining that something urgent has come up and reminding her to be careful on her way home. While waiting for her laptop to be repaired, Sulishi offers Yansheng some pastries. She deliberately snaps a photo with him in the background and posts it on social media, where Jiandan happens to see it. Misunderstanding the situation, she assumes Yansheng is busy dating Sulishi. The next day, Jian Dan tells Yan Sheng she no longer needs him to pick her up. She explains that he seems too busy, and besides, her leg is already much better. Eventually, Jian Dan has her bandages removed. At that moment, Gu Tong scolds Yan Sheng. He had promised to take responsibility, yet disappeared during the most important time. Jian Dan tries not to trouble him further, unaware that Yan Sheng is secretly watching the two of them through the glass window. Later at the library, Yan Sheng borrows the Greek mathematics book again. Inside, he slips in a handwritten apology, along with a message asking to meet the girl one more time. He carefully places the book back, hoping it will reach her hands. Jian Dan, seeing the slightly familiar phone number, is caught off guard. Yet just then, Gu Tong accidentally spills coffee on the note. Left with no choice, Jian Dan writes down her own number, hoping that the mysterious pen pal will reach out to her. At the library, while preparing for midterms, Yuan Sen runs into Jian Dan and quickly invites her and a friend to join his study group. Yan Sheng reminds everyone that no one should fall behind in the upcoming exams. Though he secretly glances at Jian Dan, she avoids meeting his eyes. The group studies late into the evening. Sulishi asks Yan Sheng to tutor her, leaving Sichuan a little disappointed. To comfort her, he folds paper toys in an attempt to cheer her up. Meanwhile, Yan Sheng asks Jian Dan to come along with him to buy coffee. Beforehand, he requests her help in finding a book about a female mathematician. Jian Dan eagerly introduces him to a biography of Hypatia, the first woman mathematician in recorded history, and shares how she once became acquainted with a pen pal through this very book. Suddenly, a thunderstorm causes the library lights to go out. As the room dims, Yan Sheng lights up the emergency lamps and gently asks Jian Dan if she'd like to meet her mysterious pen pal. Jian Dan hesitates, saying it's impossible, especially since she had accidentally torn the slip of paper with his phone number. Yan Sheng guesses that the missing digits are 1 and 3. When Jian Dan dials the number, to her shock, Yan Sheng's phone begins to ring. He answers with a soft greeting, and Jian Dan, overwhelmed with joy, finally realizes she has found her pen pal at last. On campus, Yan Sheng kindly picks up some belongings for an elderly woman. She tells him she wants to surprise her granddaughter and asks him to escort her to the girls' dormitory. Noticing the pair of women's shoes Yan Sheng is holding, she assumes he must be in love with someone. Otherwise, she would gladly introduce her own granddaughter to him. She proudly adds that her granddaughter is not only a scholarship student but also a member of the swimming club. Just then, Jian Dan calls out to the woman, and Yan Sheng realizes she is Jian Dan's grandmother. Embarrassed, he hurriedly introduces himself as the president of the swimming club. The grandmother immediately urges him to give the shoes to his girlfriend. Afraid of a misunderstanding, Yan Sheng quickly hands the shoes to Jian Dan. Later in the cafeteria, Yan Sheng takes Yuan Sen to greet Jian Dan's grandmother. Curious, she asks who looked after Jian Dan when she was injured. Yan Sheng explains that Jian Dan twisted her ankle while helping the club with a campus tour, so he only cared for her as part of his duties. Jian Dan, however, reproaches him for making empty promises. After all, he had abandoned her to eat pastries with someone else. Yan Sheng hurriedly clarifies that he was actually helping Sulishi repair her laptop, and they only stopped by a bakery while waiting. He then asks if this misunderstanding is the reason she has been ignoring him all this time. Sensing the tension, Jian Dan's grandmother quickly changes the subject and asks Yuan Sen to take a commemorative photo for her. When everyone escorts her back to the dorm, Yan Sheng notices the grandmother looks unwell. He recalls the medical report she dropped earlier, revealing chronic heart failure. He catches up, offers a small gift, and asks to speak privately. Having read the results, he urges her to take her medication on time. She then entrusts him to keep her illness secret, so Jian Dan can study without worry. At that moment, the village head arrives to escort the grandmother back to her hometown. Jian Dan immediately questions Yan Sheng about what he had discussed with her. He admits that the grandmother jokingly asked him to become her grandson-in-law to keep an eye on Jian Dan. Meanwhile, Sulishi meets Jian Dan at the beach. She confides that Yan Sheng expressed liking her, and she also harbors feelings for him. However, she feels awkward due to their long-standing friendship and hopes that Jian Dan will give her blessing for their potential relationship. Finally, the midterm exams come to an end. Yuan Sen invites Jian Dan to celebrate, but she hurriedly pulls Gu Tong along and disappears. Later, Sulishi privately asks Yan Sheng to help her buy a shirt for Sichuan, as she had accidentally torn one of his buttons and wants to replace it. Unbeknownst to her, Yan Sheng takes Sichuan along and leaves before Sulishi arrives. By coincidence, Jian Dan also heads to the shopping mall and witnesses Sulishi buying a shirt for Sichuan. When the staff mistake them for a couple, Sulishi does not deny it. Back at school, Jian Dan notices Yan Sheng wiping tears from his eyes. She assumes he is heartbroken and moves to comfort him, only to discover that he had eaten rice mixed with mustard, which caused the tears. When she asks if it's because of Sulishi, Yansheng firmly clarifies that he has never loved anyone and that he only considers Sulishi a friend. Back at the dormitory, Jiandan shares everything with her best friend. Gu Tong guesses that Sulishi must be jealous of Jiandan and invented the story that Yansheng likes her. She also asks Jiandan for advice on how to confess her feelings to Luo Shui. At a cafe, Jiandan reserves a spot for a confession scheduled for Saturday night. She mentions that Zishan is her roommate to get a discount. The cafe owner then asks Zishan to help prepare the confession setup for Jiandan. Zishan reports back, saying that Jiandan has booked a cafe reservation to confess her feelings to his roommate. Meanwhile, Yansheng feels confident. After all, he knows he's not the only one being admired, but inside, he's nervous and eagerly anticipating the moment. On the school sports ground, Jiandan sets up a small stall to help Gu Tong earn money for her own confession reservation. Yuan Sen stops by to support her and receives an extra gift, a box of men's underwear. Finding the size doesn't fit him, he gifts it to Yansheng. Zishan praises Jiandan for daring to take such risks for love. The cafe owner informs Yansheng that Jiandan hasn't yet raised the full 10 yuan needed to rent the venue, and he realizes just how much she likes him. Meanwhile, Sulishi passes by the stall and buys something, further complicating the situation. Jiandan notices someone nearby accidentally break a lipstick but pretends not to see it. When a customer buys the broken lipstick, they immediately accuse Jiandan of selling defective products. At that moment, the school supervisor arrives, questioning who dares to sell goods on campus. Jiandan is forced to refund the customer and has all her merchandise confiscated. Yansheng then appears, offering her a high-paying task to clean the swimming pool by morning in exchange for 1,000 yuan. Meanwhile, Gu Tong finally raises enough money to rent the venue for her own confession. Zishan secretly photographs Jiandan preparing her confession setup to send to Yansheng. Eager and impatient, Yansheng arrives early at the cafe to ask Jiandan if he's too early. She asks him to help hang paper cranes, but he mistakenly thinks she has written her confession on them and opens them to read. Jiandan scolds him for ruining the surprise and shoos him away. Curiously, he presses a control on the table, causing the balloons to float up into the sky. Yansheng praises her creativity and she instantly wins his approval. Just then, Gu Tong rushes in to announce that Huo Zuyang is about to arrive. Yansheng looks up at the screen and realizes that the party isn't meant for him. When Huo Zuyang finally appears, Gu Tong timidly confesses her feelings, expressing how much she admires Luo Shui and how she likes him in real life. She hopes he will become her boyfriend. Before he can respond, they notice someone taking photos secretly, turning the romantic confession into a chaotic chase. Afterwards, the school forum explodes with news. Huo Zuyang is actually Luo Shui. Netizens criticize Gu Tong's confession as awkward and clumsy. In response, Huo Zuyang decides to livestream, admitting that he is indeed Luo Shui and clarifying that Gu Tong is not his girlfriend. After all, he hasn't successfully confessed yet. Later, Huo Zuyang waits under the dormitory with a bouquet of roses, hoping for Gu Tong's answer. She immediately agrees, embracing him. And finally, Gu Tong's confession ends happily. Inspired by her success, the cafe owner decides to offer discounts to other couples. Yuan Sen advises Yansheng to seize the opportunity to confess to Jiandan. Following a pre-written script for testing her feelings, he first checks if she responds immediately when he calls. He calls Jiandan to the office, noticing that she's wearing a different dress than usual, and secretly feels pleased. Yansheng also gives her a box of fried chicken to observe her reaction. Coincidentally, Jiandan has just finished eating fried chicken from Gu Tong. Yansheng assumes she is maintaining her composure in front of him. Jiandan explains to her friend that she's saving the extra portion to share with Gu Tong. Seeing that she forgets her phone, Yansheng quickly chases after her. He overhears her telling a friend that she's too full from the previous chicken to eat more. Meanwhile, Jiandan smears ketchup on the borrowed skirt from Gu Tong, prompting Yansheng to hand her back her phone. Slightly disappointed, at that moment, a balloon floats toward Yansheng, and Jiandan quickly reaches out to catch it for him. Recalling a love manual she once mentioned, he remembers that someone who truly likes you will value you above themselves. Regaining his confidence, Yansheng goes online to research gifts suitable for girls. Meanwhile, Sulishi approaches Jiandan, lamenting that Yansheng hasn't registered for the city-level swimming competition. He was once an exceptional swimmer, but now refuses to participate in any contests. Curious, Jiandan wonders what could have happened to him. Sulishi recalls that the waves were extremely rough that day. Despite the danger, Yansheng insisted on swimming. She had rescued him from drowning, but the accident left a lasting trauma. Knowing Jiandan studies psychology, Sulishi believes she can help him overcome his fear. She even compiles a collection of Yansheng's past past victories and asks Jiandan to show them to him. Later, Jiandan passes by the pool and sees Yansheng attempting to enter the water, yet he struggles against the psychological barrier. She realizes just how deeply his past continues to affect him. At the New Year's celebration, Yansheng invites Jiandan to sit beside him. Gu Tong prepares a set of challenge cards for each guest to complete. Jiandan draws a card requiring her to be carried in a princess style by a male participant. Huo Zuyang immediately helps his girlfriend fulfill the task, while Yuan Sen must perform a female-style dance. To liven up the party, Yansheng reads out Jiandan's challenge. She must reveal whether she has had her first kiss. He wonders if she means the upside-down kiss with him. Next, Yuan Sen reads Yansheng's task. He must kiss the person to his left or right. Yansheng chooses Jiandan but cannot kiss her at the banquet table. He pulls her outside and decides to confess his feelings. Jiandan, tense and flustered, accidentally steps on a button, triggering a video showing Yansheng winning a championship and adjusting his glasses. She hopes he can reclaim his dreams and bravely return to the swimming pool. However, Yansheng seems upset, telling her she has no right to interfere in his personal matters. Jiandan freezes in shock, while Sulishi quietly achieves her goal of creating a rift between them. Feeling dejected, Yansheng walks along the beach. During the winter break, Jiandan returns home to visit her grandmother. A delivery arrives, and she discovers that Yansheng had sent heart medication for her grandmother. Concerned, she asks about her grandmother's health. Her grandmother admits she has chronic heart failure, but assures Jiandan that taking her medication regularly keeps it under control. Despite this, Jiandan visits the hospital for a checkup. The doctor advises that her grandmother should be admitted for treatment as soon as possible, though the costs are considerable. She hides her worries and asks for her grandmother's permission to participate in new social work for the winter break stipend. Since Jiandan hadn't registered to stay in the dormitory over the break, she had arrived at school early to work and earn extra money. Sichuan happens to pass by and offers to give Jiandan a ride home, mentioning that he rents an affordable place nearby. Suddenly, his car won't start. Jiandan borrows a portable battery to help him fix it. Concerned the car might break down again, Sichuan insists she ride along with him. At the repair shop, Jiandan notices the owner is hiring staff and even offers free accommodation. She immediately applies, despite the shop being staffed entirely by men. The next day at the cafe, Sichuan asks Yansheng to help pick up his car for the owner. When Yansheng arrives at the repair shop, he is surprised to see Jiandan crawling out from under a car. Observing the all-male staff, he offers to help if she's short on money, but Jiandan refuses, wanting to earn independently. Yansheng silently drives off. Later, Yansheng meets Sichuan and asks if he knew Jiandan was working at the repair shop. Sichuan explains he saw her distributing flyers on the main street, and it seems she is facing serious financial difficulties. Moreover, she even accepts free accommodation at the shop. Not long after, Yansheng approaches Jiandan with a job offer. He is going abroad and needs someone to clean regularly. Jiandan declines, but Yansheng encourages her to think it over. Just as he leaves, a male colleague informs them that 2 new employees will be joining Jiandan at the shop. Alarmed, she quickly texts Yansheng to accept his offer, only to realize that it was orchestrated by her colleague, arranged by Yansheng himself. Jiandan moves to Yansheng's aunt's house and sends him some local delicacies from her hometown, thanking him for regularly sending medicine to her grandmother. Intrigued by the complex preparation of the meat, Yansheng asks Jiandan to cook for him. He patiently waits until she finishes before sitting down to eat. He tastes each dish, evaluating them one by one, and finally concludes that her cooking nearly meets his standards. Curious, Yansheng asks when Jiandan learned to cook, reveals that at the age of 10, her parents tragically passed away in an accident. Seeing her grandmother struggle, she learned household skills early on. Yansheng volunteers to be her taste tester, helping her practice and refine her cooking. The next day, Yansheng returns for another meal. He hears that Jiandan's snail claw dish is particularly good and wants to try it. While the dish is indeed delicious, Yansheng only gives it a moderate approval. Jiandan guesses it's because the ingredients aren't fresh and recommends a high-quality food delivery source. Yansheng quickly orders meat and asks her to prepare grilled dishes. He envisions a future where Jiandan cooks and he enjoys the eating part. On the way to work, Jiandan receives a discount voucher from the barbecue shop. Remembering Yansheng's love for grilled meat, she texts him an invitation to dine together. Meanwhile, Sulishi hears that the first snow of the season will fall tonight and invites Yansheng out to eat. Thinking he is organizing a volunteer activity, she believes he should treat everyone on the last day. Yansheng feels awkward and informs Jiandan he will arrive late. Jiandan arrives early at the barbecue restaurant to wait for Yansheng, but he doesn't show up. Learning that the staff plans to merge tables, she reluctantly decides to leave before him. At that moment, Yansheng asks to leave first, but Sulishi holds him back. To show a bit of consideration for everyone, he lingers, leaving Gian Dan wandering alone as night falls. Suddenly, the season's first snow begins to fall, filling Gian Dan with joy. Yansheng appears before her, approaching through the white snow and apologizing for keeping her waiting. He then suggests they head home together for dinner. Curious, he asks Gian Dan if she knows the significance of the first snow. He learns from an advertisement on a screen that one should be with their loved one when the first snow falls. Without hesitation, Yansheng leaves everything behind to be by her side. Gian Dan, however, only understands his words after reading Gutong's post. Slightly flustered, she climbs onto a chair. Yansheng walks over and offers her a drink. Sitting together on the sofa, they sip wine and watch the snow gently fall. Gian Dan glances at a photo and wonders who stands next to Yansheng. His voice grows somber as he reveals that person is no longer with them. At the same time, Yansheng apologizes for losing his temper with Gian Dan during the New Year's party. Gian Dan notices Nan Yuan appearing in a clip of a swimming award ceremony. Yansheng recalls growing up with Nan Yuan and the fateful day he nearly drowned because of him. On that day, the waves were fierce. Nan Yuan wanted to leave, but Yansheng insisted on going into the sea. They dove deep to admire the underwater scenery, only for an unexpected accident to occur. Nan Yuan realizes his oxygen tank is empty and his life jacket malfunctions. Seeing his friend struggling, Yansheng swims to him, intending to give him his own oxygen. But by then, Yansheng's tank is also depleted. Struggling to lift Nan Yuan, he begins to suffocate. Fortunately, Sulishi arrives in time and gives Yansheng the only spare snorkel. He wants to save Nan Yuan, but his strength is completely gone. Helpless, Yansheng can only watch as his friend slowly sinks to the bottom. The next morning, unexpected knock at the door wakes Gian Dan with a start. She finds Yansheng asleep, clutching her leg. She quickly pulls her leg away and rushes to see who is at the door, discovering Gutong outside. Flustered, Gian Dan hides Yansheng in the kitchen. Despite the need to hide, Yansheng doesn't resist. He truly likes her and doesn't want to stay concealed. Outside, Huozuyang remembers that Yansheng often hides a spare key in the tree basket. At that moment, Gutong bursts in, just as Gian Dan accidentally falls into Yansheng's arms. She tries to explain, but Yansheng calmly remarks that the situation looks exactly like what the two of them have just seen. Later, Sulishi visits Gian Dan to subtly ask if she has seen Yansheng. Gian Dan explains that she is staying at his younger aunt's house, and she has also heard Yansheng's story about Nan Yuan, which is very different from Nan Yuan's own account. Sulishi apologizes, realizing she hadn't expected Yansheng to still be haunted by the past. Back at home, Gian Dan sees Yansheng carrying a suitcase. She initially misinterprets his presence as him wanting to stay with her, so she acts a little reserved. Yansheng explains that he must participate in a volunteer exchange in Qingzhou, and he won't be able to come over for meals for a while. He leaves enough groceries to last her until he returns. In response to Yansheng's request, Yuan Sen comes to visit Gian Dan. She wonders when Yansheng's younger aunt will return. Yuan Sen anxiously asks her not to come, calling it the nightmare of his life. The mere mention chokes him up. Unexpectedly, she actually arrives. Her name is Qingying, and she approaches, gripping Yuan Sen by the collar while demanding to know who Gian Dan is. Yuan Sen quickly hides behind a chair, introducing Gian Dan as Yansheng's friend. Yuan Sen decides to step back first, warning Gian Dan to be careful. Qingying presses Gian Dan against the wall, demanding to know what kind of relationship she has with her grandson. Gian Dan quickly asks to return to her room to gather her belongings and leave. Meanwhile, the village head calls Yansheng, reporting that Gian Dan's grandmother has been hospitalized, but he is unable to reach her directly. Yansheng asks Sulishi to lead the volunteer group so he can rush to the hospital. During this time, Gian Dan borrows a portable charger from a stranger and sees Yansheng's message informing her that her grandmother has collapsed. She immediately rushes to the hospital. Yansheng reassures her that his grandmother is not in life-threatening condition. The doctor reports that the surgery was successful, though she will need a few more days of observation. At the hospital room, a nurse calls for family to settle the medical bills. Yansheng asks Gian Dan to stay, explaining that once his grandmother wakes, she will want to see her granddaughter first. The nurse praises Yansheng for being both handsome and thoughtful. Gian Dan quickly transfers the money to cover the expenses while waiting for him. At that moment, Yansheng's grandmother wakes up. She tells her granddaughter not to worry about her and apologizes for troubling Yansheng on New Year's Eve. Gian Dan promises to make sure he returns home soon while she celebrates the new year with her grandmother. Only after her grandmother falls asleep does Yansheng call Gian Dan outside. Yansheng leads Gian Dan to the riverside to watch the New Year's fireworks. Gian Dan beams a bright smile, thanking him warmly. In this moment, she sets aside aside all her worries, enjoying the celebration with Yan Sheng as they welcome the new year together. At the start of the new semester, Yan Sheng brings his younger aunt into the dormitory. Noticing a photo on the desk, he realizes that Jian Dan is staying in the same room. Just then, she calls Gu Tong to fetch a towel for her. Yan Sheng, still unprepared, is hurried by Jian Dan, and reluctantly, he closes his eyes and hands the towel over. Jian Dan shares that her grandmother told her to treat Yan Sheng well, unaware that he still lacks something important. Shortly after, Jian Dan approaches Yan Sheng to ask about the criteria for evaluating the club. He recalls that the school bases its assessments on awards and members' actual performance. Clubs with poor scores receive no funding, and those ranking at the bottom, for an A, extended period face disbandment. Within the club, Jian Dan pushes the members to train diligently. Unexpectedly, Qingying arrives, asking to join the club to help raise its points. A former champion in international artificial climbing competitions, she also holds the National Youth Climbing Championship and a gold medal in women's national advancement competitions. Jian Dan welcomes her enthusiastically, seeing her as a savior for the club. However, Qingjing criticizes the place as amateurish, with outdated equipment. Back at the dormitory, Jian Dan unexpectedly runs into Qingying. She urges Qingying to submit her application to join the club, hoping this would secure more funding. Qingying offers Jian Dan a challenge. If she loses, Qingying will follow Jian Dan's guidance. At the climbing club, Qingying notices Jian Dan practicing late into the evening. Confident in her own abilities, she assumes victory is guaranteed, seeing her opponent as too inexperienced. Yan Sheng apologizes for bringing Jian Dan to his aunt's house without permission, but she insists she doesn't want to waste time on a club that lacks professionalism. Yan Sheng recalls how Jian Dan, despite having only a few months of climbing experience, has made remarkable progress. If she were incapable of leading the club, he would never have returned this venue to her. On the day of the competition, everyone cheers for Jian Dan. Qingying hopes her opponent doesn't fall too far behind. As the contest begins, both women push themselves to climb higher. Qingying, a former champion in artificial climbing, moves with swift and confident steps. Yet Jian Dan's determination is no less impressive. She manages to keep close pace with her formidable rival. Suddenly, Jian Dan slips, sending a wave of concern through the crowd. Yan Sheng was stuck in a meeting, so he had to watch the match on his phone. Seeing Jian Dan get injured, he rushed back to the climbing club in a panic. Qingjing paused, surprised by Jian Dan's perseverance. The two women crossed the finish line at the same time, prompting a roar of applause from everyone. In the end, Qingjing agreed to join the climbing club. Jian Dan hoped she could take on the role of coach for the other members. Though Qingying criticized Jian Dan's way of speaking as outdated, she still reminded the members to start training first thing the next morning. After the competition, Yan Sheng carried Jian Dan to the infirmary. Because his aunt had targeted Jian Dan earlier, he felt responsible for her. Jian Dan watched as he carefully applied medicine to her wounds. She found herself admiring every feature on his face. A sharp sting made her wince, and she scolded him for not being gentle enough. Yan Sheng reminded her that her grandmother had told her to treat him well. Jian Dan wondered if he was the one who had handed her the towel earlier. Yan Sheng explained that he had only been carrying the luggage for his aunt. Then he told her to sit still while he applied the medicine. The next day, Qingying arrived at the club and found no one there. She assumed everyone had skipped practice, but to her surprise, they had prepared a birthday celebration just for her. Although Qingying criticized their efforts as outdated, she closed her eyes and made a wish. Everyone had prepared gifts for her. Just then, Yan Sheng rushed in and ended up with a piece of cake right in the middle of his face. He pulled out a tissue from his pocket, unaware that he had dropped a box containing a necklace. Later, Qingjing went to a restaurant for her birthday. She insisted that no one would leave until everyone got drunk. They played games and finished an entire bottle of wine. Qingying was already tipsy, but still demanded more to drink, while Yan Sheng, feeling exhausted, insisted on going home. Thinking of himself as a traffic officer, he stood in the middle of the road to direct everyone. Jian Dan reported a violator to pull him aside. Yan Sheng then noticed a stray kitten. Jian Dan wanted to pet it, but Yan Sheng held her hand and placed it on his hair instead. In the car, Jian Dan secretly touched Yan Sheng's flushed cheek. Surprised, he opened his eyes and pressed her gently against the car door. He leaned in as if to kiss her, but the driver braked suddenly. Jian Dan quickly pulled him back to sit properly and regain his composure. The next morning, when Yan Sheng woke up, he couldn't remember Jian Dan bringing him home. He realized he had lost the necklace box and worried that he might have confessed his feelings while drunk. Suddenly, he recalled the moment he almost touched Jian Dan's lips in the taxi. Meanwhile, Qingjing opened the necklace box and saw the engraving, Hypatia. Jian Dan explained that it was the name of the first female mathematician in the world. Qingjing guessed that Yan Sheng had given it to her and scolded scolded him for not buying something according to her taste. Knowing Jiandan also loved math, she decided to give it to her. After school, Yansheng noticed Jiandan wearing the necklace. He asked if anything special had happened last night or if she had accepted him. Jiandan, recalling the moment she had touched his hair, blushed and nodded shyly. Yansheng thought his confession had succeeded. He took her school bag for her, and they walked together to have lunch. While standing in line, Yansheng reached out, hoping to hold her hand, feeling satisfied as he looked at her. At that moment, Jiandan raised both her hands to her face. Startled, Yansheng withdrew his hand and apologized for holding the wrong person's hand. Before heading home, Yansheng finally mustered the courage to hold his girlfriend's hand. Suddenly, the phone rang. It was Qingying calling to thank her grandson for both the necklace and a bag she had received. Since she didn't like math, she decided to give the necklace to Jiandan. Realizing his misunderstanding, Yansheng blushed and told Jiandan to go up to her room. Yuan Sen sneaked into the climbing club. He opened Qingying's drawer to hide a set of cards printed with childhood photos of himself and sighed in relief, knowing he no longer had to worry about her. Unexpectedly, a paparazzo snapped photos and mistook Yuan Sen for stealing women's underwear. At that moment, Qingying walked in and accused Yuan Sen of being perverted. He asked her to pretend to be his girlfriend so the news wouldn't spread online. Qingying agreed, but made him promise to indulge her from now on. Knowing that the student union was organizing a friendship event, Qingying wanted to find a boyfriend for Jiandan. Meanwhile, Yuan Sen asked Yansheng to hand a cup to Jiandan. Qingying mentioned she had made pottery but forgot to bring the pieces back. Jiandan needed them urgently to give as gifts at the event. It turned out that San had staged the scene to pressure Yansheng into confessing to Jiandan. Jiandan excused herself to go to the restroom, leaving her at the friendship event. Yansheng arrived in a bad mood and threw a cup at Jiandan. He asked if she had prepared a gift so meticulously just to find a boyfriend. Jiandan explained that she had only come with Qingying. She left the gift behind, pouting, and ran off. Yansheng opened the box and discovered a set of matching cups meant for him. He rushed after her, but Jiandan slipped. Afraid of losing face, she tried to run away. Yansheng caught her and asked why she had come to the event at all. Jiandan questioned why he was always controlling her. Yansheng replied that he had to keep an eye on his girlfriend. Jiandan immediately denied being his girlfriend. Yansheng then told her that she was his Hypatia, the goddess of mathematics. Jiandan realized she was the rightful owner of the necklace. Yansheng bent down to tie her jacket over the stain on her pants and reminded her to hold his hand tightly so she wouldn't fall again. The two walked hand in hand along the lakeside, happy and content. In the elective class, Jiandan deliberately tried to avoid Yansheng, fearing that his girlfriend would be upset. Yansheng gently urged her to turn back and look at him. Just then, the professor entered and began the lesson. Yansheng had no choice but to write a sincere apology letter to his girlfriend beforehand. He tossed the note toward her, but it accidentally landed near Wang Lixin's feet. The professor picked it up and read it aloud in front of the class. Jiandan, flustered, looked down and scolded Yansheng, finding his clumsy act oddly endearing. Yansheng then took her hand and led her to the club, publicly declaring their relationship in front of everyone. He told her not to hide her face because she was still beautiful to him. Embarrassed, Jiandan quickly ran off to fetch makeup remover. Later, Jiandan brought breakfast for her boyfriend and placed it on the table. Sulishi praised her for being such a thoughtful girlfriend. However, as soon as Jiandan left, Lishi threw the cake into the trash. Jiandan realized she had mistakenly picked up the wrong cake, so she returned to swap it for Yansheng's. Jiandan saw the cake in the trash and immediately guessed that Sulishi was responsible. She confronted Sulishi in the schoolyard, asking directly why she had thrown her cake away. Sulishi pretended not to understand and made an excuse about needing to go to class. Jiandan challenged her, pointing out that she knew about Nanyuan's death but still provoked her to open the video to upset Yansheng. Jiandan wanted to tell Yansheng the truth so he could see Sulishi's deceitful side. Later, at the swimming pool, Sulishi deliberately pretended to struggle in the water. At the same time, Jiandan had arranged to meet Yansheng, who also received news that Sulishi was in danger. At the hospital, Sulishi asked Zishan to fetch medicine from her bag. Yansheng arrived and noticed that she was taking antidepressants. The doctor, seeing the medication, inferred that she had endured a severe emotional shock and advised her friends not to agitate her. Sulishi apologized for keeping everything secret, explaining that ever since Nanyuan's passing, she hadn't been able to sleep well at night. She recounted that when she rescued Yansheng, she could only watch as Nanyuan sank to the bottom of the sea. Yansheng accepted all responsibility for insisting on diving that day. Jiandan called to check on Sulishi. Yansheng informed her that Sulishi had regained consciousness and that he would come see her soon. Sulishi, however, However, feigned continued pain to make Yansheng's stay longer. After being discharged from the hospital, Sulishi's mental state continued to deteriorate. She even forgot that she had just called Yansheng. Feeling frustrated, she tore up her music book in anger. Yansheng, worried about leaving her alone, once again missed his date with Jian Dan. Sulishi deliberately called out Yansheng's name over the phone to make Jian Dan misunderstand. On the way to the club, Sulishi saw Jian Dan and felt dizzy. She pretended to be weak and asked Yansheng to help escort her back to her room. Meanwhile, Mi Fen happened to pass by the swimming club office and accidentally saw Sulishi switching her medication. She sneaked in to pick up the discarded pill wrappers and discovered that they were only vitamin C supplements. Mi Fen returned to the dormitory and collapsed on her bed. Jian Dan noticed that she had a high fever and rushed her to the hospital. The doctor informed them that Mi Fen had appendicitis and would need several days of monitoring. After surgery, Jian Dan told the two friends to go home first, while she stayed to look after Mi Fen. The next morning, when Mi Fen woke up, she noticed that Jian Dan had been watching over her all night. Grateful, Mi Fen asked her to buy a bottle of vitamin C. Later, when Jian Dan returned, she picked up a tablet and realized that all the pills looked identical. Without the engraved markings, it would have been easy to confuse them. Outside, Yansheng, seeing this, mistakenly thought his girlfriend had been hospitalized. Worry creasing his face, he quickly scanned her over for any sign of illness. Jian Dan reassured him that she wasn't sick. It was Mi Fen who was suffering from appendicitis. Jian Dan teased him, asking if he was really that worried about her. Yansheng, earnestly claiming to be the ideal boyfriend, was met with Jian Dan's playful jab about his self-importance. Since the two rarely saw each other, Yansheng hurried after Jian Dan, trying to soothe her. At that moment, Sulishi called, mentioning she felt a bit unwell and asking him to come to the swimming club. Jian Dan wanted to accompany her boyfriend and went to Sulishi's room. She appeared to have a mild headache and suddenly remembered she hadn't taken her medicine yet. Jian Dan noticed that Sulishi's pills were engraved exactly like Mi Fen's vitamin C. In a dramatic turn, Sulishi dropped her cup and even intentionally cut her hand. Not wanting to watch her boyfriend being so attentive to another girl, Jian Dan reluctantly excused herself and left first. At that moment, Sichuan came in to report that he had just connected with an international psychologist who required the results of Sulishi's previous psychological evaluation to determine the best treatment plan. Sulishi quickly made an excuse, claiming she had misplaced her medical records and insisting she didn't need treatment. Qingying arranged to meet Sulishi and inquired about her health. Sulishi was slightly surprised by the sudden concern. Remembering that Sulishi often came here, Qingying asked her assistant to prepare a drink. Taking advantage of Sulishi stepping away, Qingying inspected her medication. It became clear that Sulishi had been faking her illness and had secretly swapped her antidepressants for vitamin C. Qingying then called Jian Dan and asked her to bring Yansheng to expose Sulishi. Just as Sulishi returned, Qingying pretended to compliment her bag. An employee brought coffee but accidentally spilled it on Sulishi's bag. Qingying offered to take the bag inside to help clean it. Finally, Yansheng arrived. Just as the employee returned Sulishi's bag, Qingying immediately revealed Sulishi's deception, faking her illness and switching her medication for vitamin C. Sulishi accused Qingying of insulting her, but Qingying demanded she show the medication as proof. Qingying snatched Sulishi's bag and handed the medication to Yansheng, who immediately confirmed that it was indeed antidepressants. However, Qingying soon realized that it wasn't the same batch as before. Surprisingly, Sulishi didn't blame the two friends. She only felt a bit weary. Yansheng chased after her, telling his friends not to overthink things. Feeling fragile, Sulishi asked him to go for a walk with her. Jian Dan ran up to apologize for misunderstanding her earlier, explaining that, as a psychology student, she wanted to help Sulishi overcome her illness. At the beach, Sulishi asked Jian Dan to take some photos for her. Jian Dan happily snapped two separate shots, one of Sulishi alone and another with Yansheng. Then Sulishi asked for a photo together with her boyfriend. Quick on the move, Jian Dan jumped onto Yansheng's back, making it impossible for him to escape. Sitting between his girlfriend and best friend, Yansheng felt a little tense. Sulishi asked him to open a bottle of water for her, and Jian Dan did so instantly, without needing any thanks. She then wanted to drink a can of alcohol from Yansheng's hand, but Jian Dan advised her against consuming stimulants. Sulishi recalled a time long ago when she had camped on the beach with Yansheng. He quickly added that Huo Zuyang and Zishan were also there. She also mentioned keeping the opera notebook they had sung together. Jian Dan, worried that watching tragedies could be depressing, performed a comedic monologue to help Sulishi heal emotionally. Sulishi teased her, saying that Yansheng had disliked comedy since childhood. Finally, Yansheng waited for Zishan Dan, asking him to look after Sulishi before politely taking his girlfriend home. Sulishi advised him to let go and promised not to repeat past mistakes. It turned out that when the cafe staff brought Sulishi's bag inside, Yansheng had already realized she had been faking her illness. Sichuan, not wanting her to lose face, secretly placed the real antidepressants in the bag, giving her a chance to confess on her own. On the way home, Gian asked her boyfriend if he trusted her, explaining that she had actually seen the vitamin C in Sulishi's bag. Yansheng believed her, knowing she would never falsely accuse anyone without reason. After learning about his daughter's depression, Sulishi's father wanted to take her abroad for treatment, but she insisted she wasn't ill and promised to explain everything to her father when they returned. Unbeknownst to her, Yansheng was standing right behind. Qingying recalled that ever since childhood, Sulishi had always tried to push any girl away from Yansheng. She revealed to her grandson that it was Sulishi who had given John Dan the video of him and Nan Yuan. Sulishi admitted that her actions were driven by her intense feelings for Yansheng. Yansheng firmly declared that he already had a girlfriend. John Dan noticed that while Sulishi claimed to like him, she consistently used Nan Yuan to hurt him. Clearly, this wasn't love, it was blind control. Gian Dan gathered everyone together, determined to help Yansheng overcome his psychological barriers. Recalling advice from her psychology book, she decided to guide him to confront his past. Yuan Sen came up with an idea and dragged Yansheng to the women's dormitory. Qingying, standing above, intended to pour a bucket of water on Yansheng, but accidentally bumped into a chair, spilling it all over Yuan Sen instead. On the second day, Gian Dan arranged to meet Yansheng at the park. They waited for the fountain to turn on unexpectedly as part of the plan to help him face his fears. However, Yansheng wanted to buy bubble tea for his girlfriend, so he stepped away from the fountain. Gian Dan chased after him and planted a kiss to keep him in place. At that very moment, the fountain erupted, but Yansheng was completely captivated by their first kiss. Gian Dan's lips had claimed both his mind and heart. After hearing the group's plan, Yansheng clarified that he was only afraid of swimming. Standing in the fountain felt as natural as taking a daily shower. Undeterred, Yuan Sen launched the third phase of the plan, taking Yansheng to a hot spring and pretending to struggle in the water. Seeing that the pool was less than a meter deep, Yansheng shouted for him to stop acting. Gian Dan held her boyfriend's hand as they entered the hot spring, but Yansheng still lacked the courage. Gian Dan deliberately dropped her necklace and signaled Gutong. The group panicked and scrambled to search for it. Seeing Gian Dan slip, Yansheng immediately waded in to help her. After finally finding the necklace, Gian Dan embraced Yansheng, confident that he would overcome his psychological barrier. Gian Dan continued to immerse him in the water and then dragged him into a breath-holding competition. Yuan Sen mentioned that Yansheng had once held his breath for 4 minutes and 20 seconds, and everyone believed he could surpass it. When Yansheng began the challenge, the group cheered with joy the moment he broke the competition record. Later, Yansheng visited Nan Yuan's house. Hesitant at first, he greeted her aunt and introduced Gian Dan as his girlfriend. He apologized for stubbornly diving into the sea all those years ago. Nan Yuan's aunt had never blamed him. Understanding that no one wished the accident had happened, she shared that she had overcome the pain of loss and hoped Yansheng would not be haunted by it either. She believed that Nan Yuan cherished Yansheng and certainly wouldn't want him to remain burdened by the past. At that moment, Nan Yuan's father returned and greeted Yansheng, also informing him that the family would soon be moving abroad. Yansheng helped them pack and unexpectedly noticed the watch he had once given Nan Yuan. He recounted how they had grown up together, studying side by side, sharing a love for swimming, and training for city-level competitions. However, Nan Yuan suddenly suffered a hip injury, forcing him to give up his spot in the competition. Yansheng guessed that the injury happened while he was teaching him the butterfly stroke. Not wanting to compete without him, Yansheng chose to train with him for recovery. Nan Yuan reminded him of their promise. He must compete and claim first place. Yansheng fulfilled the promise and lifted the swimming championship trophy together with Nan Yuan. Looking at an old photograph, he remembered how they once sent letters to the Time post office. Nan Yuan's mother revealed that her son had indeed received that letter. Reading Nan Yuan's final words, Yansheng made up his mind to take the underwater lifeguard certification exam to carry out the dream his friend could not complete. Since Gian Dan also wanted to to volunteer alongside her boyfriend. Yansheng began teaching her CPR. Feeling a little embarrassed, Jiandan insisted on making him play the role of a drowning victim. Yansheng explained that after 30 chest compressions, without signs of recovery, artificial respiration was required. He instructed her to focus, one hand lifting the chin, the other pinching the nose, before blowing air into the victim's mouth. Closing his eyes, Yansheng urged her to breathe strongly into him. Just then, their friends appeared at the wrong moment and hurriedly retreated. Jiandan scolded her boyfriend for not bothering to explain, but Yansheng only pulled her tightly into his arms. During the lifeguard volunteer qualification test, Yansheng hesitated and couldn't bring himself to enter the water. Jiandan quickly made an excuse, saying he wasn't feeling well, and took him outside to rest. To lift Yansheng's spirits, Huo Zuyang organized a small celebration for his romance with Gutong, marking their 199th day together. The group raised their glasses in a cheerful toast. Gutong thanked everyone for joining by hiding small gifts in the sand. Excited, Qingying discovered a heart-shaped stone, which seemed to give her courage. In a sudden burst of boldness, she kissed Yuan Sen on the cheek, only to pretend she was drunk when she realized he wasn't ready for such a moment. Meanwhile, Jiandan kept digging without finding her gift. She asked her boyfriend to help while she stepped away. When she returned, she heard cries that someone was drowning. Spotting Yansheng's hat floating on the surface, she panicked and dove frantically into the sea, calling his name as she searched beneath the waves. In reality, Yansheng had only stepped aside to take a phone call. Seeing Jiandan struggling in the water, he shouted for her to come back to shore, but she couldn't hear him, and he still feared going into the sea. At the sound of Jiandan's desperate cries, Yansheng finally cast aside his fear and plunged into the water. When Jiandan saw him, she swam with all her strength toward him and clung to him tightly. Just as Huo Zuyang and Yuan Sen rushed in to help. Revived, Yansheng comforted his girlfriend, gently urging her to stop crying. The next morning at the hospital, Yansheng underwent a psychological assessment, and although the doctor told him not to worry while waiting for the results, his anxiety lingered until a message from Jiandan arrived, saying she missed her boyfriend and inviting him to attend her psychology lecture. Coincidentally, the professor was speaking about post-traumatic stress disorder, citing cases where patients had recovered through therapy and medication, but also one of a boy who nearly drowned, and, unable to overcome his trauma during treatment, fell into severe depression, something Jiandan brushed off as an exception. Meanwhile, Yuan Sen rushed to the airport after Qingying, believing she was about to leave the country, and tried to keep her from going, but she explained that she had already committed to an international rock climbing competition. Relieved, Yuan Sen blamed Yansheng for not clarifying things sooner. To make amends for once tearing her tarot deck, he gave Qingying a brand new set and entrusted both the cards and himself to her care, only for her to remind him not to regret it, as she tended to cling tightly. At the same time, Sulishi approached Jiandan with an apology, confessing her plan to resign as manager of the swimming club to focus on her studies. Admitting she had acted blindly and made many mistakes, she did not expect forgiveness, but simply hoped Jiandan could help Yansheng overcome his psychological barriers. One morning, Jiandan brought breakfast for her boyfriend, only to find Yansheng listening to Sulishi play the piano. It turned out that Sulishi knew a specialist in music therapy and was trying the method on him. Later at the office, Yuan Sen mentioned it again, just as Jiandan arrived at the music room with breakfast, only to see Yansheng happily immersed in melodies. When his girlfriend teasingly asked about her meal, she remarked that he seemed already full from the music itself. Yansheng found her jealousy endearing and explained that it was Sichuan who had invited him there for music therapy, assuring her it wasn't the private world of two she had imagined. To make up for it, he gifted Jiandan a beautiful dress, inviting her to join him that evening at a concert. Because of work, Zishan arrived late, and Jiandan, noticing Sulishi's broken hairpin, kindly offered her own as a replacement. At the concert, Yansheng draped his coat over Jiandan's shoulders, just as Zishan entered and sat beside Sulishi. As the graceful music began to flow, the entire hall was soon carried away by its enchanting rhythm. The next day was Yansheng's follow-up appointment, but the doctor's evaluation showed little improvement in his psychological condition. Exhausted, he returned to the office and found a voice recorder in his drawer. To his dismay, he heard Jiandan's voice saying that he could never be cured, followed by her intention to give up and end their relationship. Later at the climbing club, he saw Jiandan searching for the device and asked whether those words were truly hers. When she nodded, his heart sank and he walked away in disappointment. Jiandan quickly grabbed the recorder and chased after him, feigning an injured ankle to stop him, but Yansheng coldly asked her not to see him for the time being. Confused, Jiandan didn't understand why he reacted with such sudden anger. In truth, what he heard was only part of a much longer recording she had made to track his condition, but because the device had been damaged when Yansheng dropped it, the rest never played. Misunderstanding her intentions, he refused to give her a chance to explain. Soon after, Yuansen called him to the club to help Huo Ziyang celebrate his 214th day with Gu Tao. At the pool, Yansheng recalled the doctor's warning that overcoming post-traumatic stress disorder required tremendous willpower, and that during treatment he might suffer from anxiety, irritability, even depression that could lead to self-destructive thoughts. Just then, Gian Dan appeared, begging him to hear her out, but he refused, and coldly repeated his desire to break up. When she tearfully asked if he truly meant it, Yansheng turned away quickly, not wanting her to see the redness in his eyes. Left behind, Gian Dan broke down in sobs, unable to understand what was happening to the man she loved. Late at night, Sulishi found Yansheng drunk on the basketball court, and took the initiative to help him back to the dormitory. At that very moment, Gian Dan arrived at the men's dorm, as she often did, only to see him walking alongside Sulishi, and instinctively turned away in silence. The next day, Yansheng packed his things and left for Sichuan to attend training for an upcoming math competition, entrusting Yuan Sen with the responsibility of managing the club in his absence. When Yuan Sen informed Gian Dan by phone, she realized she would no longer have the chance to see him. Meanwhile, Zishan finally managed to repair the voice recorder, and Gian Dan discovered that the clip Yansheng had heard had been cut and spliced. She suddenly remembered that she still had the original files saved on her computer. At the same time, Yansheng froze when Gian Dan's name was mentioned, and just as he received a message from her, he hurriedly played the recording. What unfolded was like a diary, filled with Gian Dan's thoughts and emotions as she closely monitored his condition. Her joy when he cooperated, her heartbreak when he lost confidence, and her helplessness when she didn't know how to ease his pain. She recalled watching a film about a young man suffering from the same illness, who, out of fear of being abandoned, tried to break up with his girlfriend, but with the help of a professor, eventually overcame his trauma. Gian Dan began to wonder if she should stop forcing methods of treatment and simply let Yansheng heal at his own pace. After all, she didn't care if he ever swam again. What she wanted most was for him to be happy. Yet the truth was that Yansheng's condition was far more severe than she had ever imagined. Unable to reach Yansheng by phone, Gian Dan feared he had never read her message, so she asked Zishan to check, only to learn that he had seen it and simply ignored her. Heartbroken, she returned to the club and climbed furiously, as if trying to scale away her pain, before staring helplessly out at the vast sea and resolving to give up on this love. Meanwhile, Qingying went to the swimming club to fetch a seal for Yuan Sen, and stumbled upon Yansheng's psychological evaluation. When Gian Dan learned of it, she blamed herself for being careless, for failing to realize just how fragile he truly was. In desperation, she rushed to the shore, digging frantically through the sand in search of a necklace, until a little girl happened to find it and returned it to her. With renewed determination, Gian Dan slipped into the training camp, running everywhere in search of Yansheng. Climbing onto a chair, she finally spotted him, only to be discovered herself, forcing her to snatch up a box of pastries and flee. Inside, Yansheng caught sight of a symbol scrawled on the window, a sign he instinctively knew was from Gian Dan, and he hastily scribbled a note before running out to find her. From a distance, her voice rang out as she called his name, and when he turned, he was met with the smile that had always haunted his heart. Gian Dan told him she had read his evaluation, but insisted there were still countless ways left to try, and no matter what happened, she would always be there to protect him. On his birthday, Gian Dan pressed a gentle kiss to Yansheng's cheek, and he slowly leaned in to place one on her lips, vowing never to leave her side again. Their friends raised their glasses in celebration of the couple's reunion, while Qingying wondered aloud who had spliced the recording in the first place. Yansheng admitted he had asked around, but still didn't know who had placed the voice recorder in his drawer. The truth surfaced when Gian Dan accidentally picked up Sulishi's phone and noticed it was stained with the same pigments used in the club. Meeting her in private, Gian Dan confronted Sulishi, asking if she had taken the recorder. Though Sulishi claimed she had already given up on Yansheng, Gian Dan coolly remarked that she had deceived everyone with her act. She recalled the day she left the recorder on the desk, surrounded by paints for redecorating the club walls, and realized Sulishi must have tampered with it. Resolute, Gian Dan declared that no matter what schemes Sulishi tried, she would never leave Yansheng. At last, Sulishi confessed that she had acted out of jealousy, insisting she had been by Yansheng's side since childhood. But just then, Yansheng appeared, firmly stating that without Gian Dan, he would never have chosen Sulishi anyway, for to him, she had only ever been a friend. Zishan was left disheartened, realizing realizing at last that Sulishi had only been using him, pretending to grow close so that others would believe she had truly given up on Yan Sheng. Soon after, Sulishi appeared at the club to announce that she would be leaving the country. Before her departure, she expressed her hope that Yan Sheng could overcome his psychological barriers, reminding him that Namyuan's death had not been entirely his fault. She then confessed that on the day of the accident, she had rented the oxygen tanks herself because the shop owner was busy, never realizing she had mistakenly taken 2 defective ones. Choosing to keep the truth hidden, she had allowed Yan Sheng to bear the burden alongside her. Offering him a final apology, she quietly walked away. Sometime later, Yan Sheng returned to the lifeguard qualification test, and this time, he succeeded, finally fulfilling the dream that Nam Yuan had once left behind. At the graduation ceremony, Yan Sheng was honored to take the stage and deliver a speech, but when he saw his girlfriend rushing toward him, he asked to add a few more words. Mathematics, he said, had once been the most beautiful thing in his eyes, but he later realized that true fulfillment came only after meeting Gian, the one who had stood by him through his darkest days. Declaring his deep love for her, Yan Sheng gazed down from the stage at the school courtyard, recalling their very first encounter. Gian, with her curly hair, scolding him for knocking her over without so much as an apology. He reflected that so many beautiful love stories began just like that. Yet now, with summer vacation behind them, Gian lamented that Yan Sheng no longer had time off, while she returned to her hometown and counted the days they were apart. By the river, catching fish beneath the quiet sky, she found herself wishing she could see him again. And then, as if in answer to her heart, a voice suddenly called her name. Turning, she saw Yan Sheng leaping from a boat, swimming with all his strength toward the woman he loved. The film comes to an end here. Thank you for watching, and see you again next time.